So diving into 12.5 today. Not sure if we have anybody absent or not. Zach?
Can you hand back our tests?
I did not get to revisions last night because I never came back to school. So I have the not finished ones and the people that are like, you need to come finish your test with me. So AO, extensions, whatever you came out. Or lunch. Yeah, you're pretty close to being finished. Two friends are arguing. Let's say Seth and Nate. Seth and Nate are arguing over.
This is what happens a lot.
Except
we
you
don't
guys are
sell
always
stuff.
beside each other. They're arguing over what they need to charge. Yeah. Let's say Seth says let's charge 36,
Oh man.
and Nate says, nah, man, they only owe us 33.25.
Oh man.
They normally charge an hourly rate of $2.75, or sorry, they charge a normal hourly rate and $2.75 flat fee for yard bags. Now, if you ever bought yard bags, which you probably haven't, that would pay for about 5, maybe 6 or 7. Write and solve equations to show how each friend could be correct. So if you think Seth's correct, write an equation to justify charging $36. If you think Nate's correct, write an equation justifying that they only owe $33.25. Choose one, write an equation to justify, and find out how many hours each of them thinks they worked.
How many lawn bags are there? Wait, but don't we?
That's a
already know?
flat fee. That's just, hey, we're going to charge you $2.75 for however many lawn bags we use. So some people are going to get a better deal than others. Like if they got more yard bags, they got a better deal. How do I set this up? How would I set up Seth's equation? Seth, do you know? If you think that they're going to charge 36. I'm sure I'll give you a second to think about that since Nate was raising his hand. Do you know how to set up your equation, Nate?
So I would do 33.25 equals 2. Yeah, 2 x plus 275.
Because Nate picked out 2-hour raking job. So we don't know what the hourly rate is. That's our X. But we do know they worked for 2 hours and they charge a fixed fee of $2.75. So now to solve that, we would first, Nate,
Subtract 275 from both sides.
subtract $2.75 from both sides. So do the 75 first. That takes us down to $32.50. Then take the $2 away. So that will take me to $30.50 is equal to 2x. So then to get my x by itself,
So you have to
we
divide by 2.
divide by 2 and we get
15, 20, 15.
$15.25. Now that's not crazy, but $15 and a quarter is kind of an annoying price per hour. Why don't you just make it 15 bucks, man? Why you gotta be all hard? 15 and a quarter. Well, let's see what rate Seth wants to use.
36 equals 2h plus 2.75.
I'll come down here. 36 equals 2h. So now h is his hourly rate plus 275. So the first thing we do,
Subtract 2.75.
take away the 2.75, which will give me,
34.4.
ooh, close, borrow. We get 33.25 equals 2h. Then we would divide by 2, and that's going to give us what now?
11.75.
You're close.
No, 11.
It's not 11 because you're only dividing by
11,
2.
12.5. No, wait. A decimal and a decimal. 11, 12.
Do half of 32 since it's an even number.
That's
That'd be 16. Then half of the other dollar, that's another 50 cents. So 16.50. Then half of 25 is 12 and a half. So it's going to be 16.62.5. What? So we would have to round if we want to actually charge something real. So apparently Seth wants to charge $16.63 every hour.
I'm just crazy like that.
Whose rate do you think kind of makes more sense?
Snare time.
Nate's rate is easier to deal with because it ends in a quarter. Seth's rate has to round, and still it's not very friendly. Unless people are writing you checks, because then you can make it whatever value you want. But if people are trying to pay you cash, that'd be really annoying. So Seth, check your math before you go out. You want a rate that people will be happy to pay. Like if you made it $10 an hour, people are easy to pay that because it's just $10 an hour. If you made it like 12.37 an hour, they're gonna be like, "What? No, go away."
See See, can you like manipulate someone? Say you're charging like $12 an hour, and then you just take as long as possible to rake the leaves.
You could, but then they'll
Say
never
like
hire
you
you
take
again.
4 hours, and then they have to pay you $48.
But sometimes
Just to
when,
rake the leaves
sometimes when you
back
agree to an hourly, they'll say, "and at most." They'll say, "I'll give you $12 an hour, but the longest you can take is 3 hours." So sometimes people say that to make sure that, yeah, you don't just take as long as possible. So now we have this on your notes. First one wasn't on your notes, it was just to wake you up. An employee earns $7.25 per hour for the first 40 hours. What happens after 40 hours? Any parents ever talk about having to work a lot in a week and they're like, "Well, it's okay because 40 hours is the common work week. You work 8 hours a day for 5 work days in the week. If you work more than that, you hopefully get paid overtime." So overtime is something you get extra compensation for working beyond what you're supposed to, or what you have to, or what you're contracted to work.
So like if we do like extra work, we're working overtime, and we're basically
Yeah, I'll double what you make
paid
per
with
hour. Yeah.
knowledge.
I'll double what I pay you.
Wait, you pay us to be?
Think about it. I'll double what I pay you.
Oh, wow.
If I
He
pay
pays
you
us
nothing
nothing.
right now,
2 times nothing
and I
equals
double it.
0. Thank you.
Nothing.
That took
All
me
right.
a while, Seth.
Here's everything we know. He works 40 hours making $7.25. He then works some amount of overtime, making $10.88 each hour during overtime, for a total of $344.40. I want you to set up an equation that we can use to solve for how many hours? How many overtime hours? I encourage you to not use O. That is a bad variable. I would use H or something that doesn't
Or
look like a
V
number.
for over.
Like 2 minutes overtime.
Depends how the company does it. If you have like a clock in, clock out, they will only pay you for actual hours, or they'll round half hours up, and you know what I mean. But like, so if I worked 8 hours and 7 minutes today, then that adds to tomorrow when I might work 8 hours and 22 minutes extra. So, yeah, and then it just keeps, because that's when, like, a lot of the jobs that I had up until digital clock in, clock out systems, you literally, like, at when I lifeguarded, you'd have a time card, you'd put it in a machine, you'd hit a button, and it would stamp it with what time it was, like what date and what time. And that was your time in. When you went to lunch, you'd stamp it, clock out. Came back from lunch, stamp it, clock in. You go to leave for the day, stamp it, clock out. And they were very precise about how many minutes you worked.
Like SpongeBob, when he goes to work, he
Yeah.
takes his card and puts it in, and then takes it out. And if he's late, Mr. Krabs takes away money out of his paycheck.
I know, that's how it works.
That's silly.
Who knows how I figure out my variable term and my constant term? Baylor?
I have an equation, but I haven't solved it yet.
You have an equation but you haven't solved. That's fine. Give me the equation that you have.
Okay. 7.25 multiplied by 40 plus 10.88. Got t representing time, which is
You're talking too fast. What'd you make your variable?
t.
T for time.
Yes. Equals 344.
That's what I did.
Sure. Whatever your variable is doesn't matter as long as you know what it is.
I did W for work.
Jackson is absolutely right. We need to take my $7.25 and multiply it by 40 because I know that we worked 40 hours at that pay rate. That gives me a constant term of $290. That's what I made this week before overtime. And guys, I forget what minimum wage is right now, but this is what minimum wage was.
It's
Like,
8 something.
that's what minimum wage was just a couple years ago. So when you think about wanting to buy a new Xbox game or wanting to buy like a hoverboard or whatever you want to buy, if you worked 40 hours in a week at that minimum wage, which just a couple years ago that was minimum wage, you'd only make $290, and that's before taxes. So you'd probably actually bring home maybe like $220, $230, depends on your tax rate. So you got to think about how much money certain things cost and how long you'd have to work to pay for something like that.
Well, I mean, if you're living by yourself, that'd probably be fine because I mean.
But if you're living by yourself, you'd be paying rent on your own. You'd be paying utilities on your own. If you're going to play your game on your internet, you got to pay your internet on your own. You got to pay for water, electricity, gas. It's a lot to pay for.
You could buy. You could buy.
I think it's like $8.60.
Yeah.
You could buy.
It's really high right
They're
now.
trying to make it $10.25. Well, actually, there's a group trying to make it $10.10. $10.10.
Right. That'd probably be more.
What do we do first here? I should get out our cards. Olivia, what do we do first here?
Add 290.
Wait.
I'm glad that you're kind of in between here. This is not the symbol that we're looking for. When you look at your constant term, you're looking for what symbol is in front of it. Is this a positive or a negative value? It is a positive value, so to get rid of it, we need to subtract. So we take away the 290 from both sides. What is my right side now going to tell me? When I take away that 290, I now have 1088 times t equal to, $54.40. What is that $54.40? Nate?
The amount that you make working over.
That's the amount that you made working overtime.
But we don't know the hours.
So this week, he made about $55, almost $55, working overtime. We can figure out how many hours by isolating our t, and to do that, Karen, we want to divide on both sides. And that'll be t is equal to 5 hours. Always label, guys. Always label. 5 hours. Questions on how we did a problem like this? Anyone realize when you were taking the mastery that the progressing to mastery has some even better problems? That this really is practical to real life, like thought process and figuring out, like if I have $20 and I go bowling and shoes cost $3.50 and each game costs $4, like these are real situations that you encounter in the world, and just knowing how to quickly deal with the equation in your head is really, really useful.
It's not like those math problems in elementary school, like Bob bought 6 million pineapples.
Yeah,
No one really does.
right. James has 7 apples in one hand and 3 oranges in the other. What does he have? Really big hands. Yeah.
I saw this picture and it showed a guy with a cart. He was walking out with like 17 watermelons in a cart. and
These
he
are the
said,
math problems.
The people that you hear about in math problems.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Bob has
A small coffee distributor, you're trying this on your own. A small coffee distributor spends $7,860 on his business expenses.
That's probably accurate.
And to produce each bag of coffee, it costs him $4.25 from the beans, the roasting, everything else. If they charge $12 per bag, how many bags of coffee must the company sell in 1 month for its sales to equal its costs? So the first thing you'd want to write down is that sales should equal the cost, or cost should equal the sales. We have one variable here. That variable is how many bags. He produces so many bags, he sells so many bags. Those numbers we're assuming will be equal. We're assuming he sells every single bag he produces. There's a place up in Maine like this where it's very, very small They make super specialty coffee. They make a blueberry coffee that's like
No, that sounds
popular
good.
all over.
Pumpkin
People
spice latte.
order it and they ship it all over the U.S.
Okay, so it charges. Does that mean
Like the company
Okay.
charges.
Kind of like
and then
Carlos Bakery.
I have a equation.
You have an equation? I've talked with you a lot today. I'm gonna move on. Sorry, bud.
But can you talk
Noah?
to
Barista?
Huh?
Isn't that called a barista?
The person that makes your coffee is a barista. There's coffee roasters. There's coffee. Yeah, there's a lot of people behind a cup of coffee. Lots of work went into this. For now,
I think I have the equation. Is it
All right.
7,860 equals a 4.25x times 12?
Nope. Peyton?
7,860 equals 12b minus 4.25.
Ooh, okay, I totally agree. But I'm going to set it up one step above that. So what you just told me is the next step. So we want to start with our cost on one side and our profit or our sales on the other. So if I'm looking at cost, 7,860, that's part of my cost. James, what else goes into the cost?
The produce of the bag.
How much it costs to produce each bag. So I'm going to use B as each bag. So my left side right now, I flipped this around and I'm making my costs or my expenses equal my sales. And for it to equal my sales, well, what do I make from my sales? Balaam?
Okay, you have to, the bags of coffee sold. Wait, but I have another thing.
Not so you're telling me just to put B here?
No, it's 12.
Ah, 12B. Okay, what else did you have?
So, instead of doing all this, can you just, wait, I'm one step ahead, never mind.
So you are about to talk about profit, right?
Yeah, with the
Profit per bag. So what Peyton and Jackson have both alluded to or tried to get us to is when we subtract this $4.25 per bag, well, these are like terms, so they can be combined. And this is what Peyton said. She said 7,860 equals 12B minus 4.25B because I want my expenses to equal my profit, and my profit per bag is $7.75. So every bag we sell, we're making $7.75. So to figure out how many bags I have to sell to cover these expenses, I just have to do the division by the profit from each bag. And we get that B must equal. Anyone solve it yet? Bailey?
Okay, it's a big number. But 1,014 and 631st.
So can you sell a partial bag of coffee?
No.
No. So in this situation, we have to round it. And because we can't sell less than what we calculated, we have to round it up. No matter what the number does, we have to round it up. So what'd you say it would then turn into 1,015? So in a month, this coffee company has to sell 1,015 bags. If we then want to take that a step further, let's figure out per day. Well, let's say it's a standard month with 30 days in the month. If we take that value and divide it by 30, what's 1,015 divided by 30? February only has 28 days.
I know.
1,015 divided by 30.
34.
34. So approximately, they would need to sell 34 bags each day.
That's not even getting into profit. That's just canceling out.
What's it called when you don't make money, you don't lose money?
You break even.
Break even. So this is our break even point. They have to sell 34 bags every day just to break even. This is how hard it is to start small businesses. There's a lot of expenses that you incur. You don't want to make your profit margin too big Because what if you try to make your profit margin really big? What if they charge $20 a bag of coffee?
Oh.
You're only gonna sell like 3.
Yeah, people probably aren't gonna buy as many. So
Better
you have
be
to
really
find
good
that.
coffee.
Yeah, you gotta find that sweet spot of, and this is what Phoenix Fair does for you guys. Because start thinking now, you can do Phoenix Fair next year. We encourage 8th graders to do it. People have made hundreds of dollars at Phoenix Fair.
What's the most you've known?
You'd have to talk to Miss Rosie about that, or Miss Pettigrew might know, but I'm not certain. Nate.
In a year, they sell 12,180.
Yeah, so you take this and multiply by 12,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And then in a decade,
Oh my
they
gosh.
sell 121,800 bags of coffee.
If their company
What a
lasts
century
for a
long.
decade,
How about a century?
you're assuming that they'll be here for a decade.
Times that
Oh,
by 9.
before we move on too far, who passed out the notes? Were there any extras? So we're all here. Good. If we weren't all here and there were extras, those would go right here now. I'm going to have a different, I need to go back to Walmart. These are on clearance and they're bright and awesome. I'm going to have a different folder for every chapter, and then I got to figure out after the chapter's done what to do with it. I might just stick it in the bin, like where these things were. I might just turn that into like chapter or whatever instead of being days that you missed chapter material. So here, in the Math 7, the back one is 9-1. The next one is 9-2. The front one is always the most recent. So if you missed yesterday's class, it should be the front paper in here. Or if there's a progressing to mastery, that'll be in those folders too. So I'm just now doing your class resources available in that folder. Also, always available up on Schoology. All the notes are posted on Schoology in that folder that says blank notes. It's inside each chapter. I want to see if you guys can set this up on your own. I know it's not a got it, but you guys are getting good at this. Two friends go out to eat and order the same meal. That's important because it's the same. If they pay 6% tax and a 20% tip on their meals. Now, okay, so one rule about tipping that most Americans don't realize, and I forget if I've talked about it in this class, you tip based off the cost of food and drink. You do not tip off the total that includes the tax. You don't need to tip on your tax. So when you tip, you look at the food and drink total. Yeah, the subtotal,
I'm guessing
and that's what you tip
waiters-
off of.
Waiters don't really tell people that 'cause
Exactly.
they'll take the extra money.
Exactly. Which, I mean, it's nice if you give them extra money, but you know, if you're
Pay
thinking
more than
about
you
I need to tip 20%, you look at the subtotal. So the total bill, including tax and tip, is $27.72. That's a cheap bill. How much did each meal cost before tax and before tip? So if it's extra 6% tax on the meal price.
Is tip and tax are different.
Yeah, so
You can't
tip
just
is
add the
extra
percents
money
to
given to the waiter or
Right.
the waitress.
You can't just add
Tax goes to the state. So what you're gonna set up is that you've got 2 meals plus an extra 6% of the meals plus an extra 20% of the meals cost. How do we do this? And this doesn't even work, I don't think. I tried to tell this. Ooh, it does. I tried to show one to the sub the other day, and it wouldn't work.
Where'd you go?
I was feeling really bad yesterday. After teaching 3 classes, I kind of got my stuff stuck in this mentality of I can't miss a whole day because my classes in the morning, I have 3 different classes to teach, and one of them is the high school class. A lot of guest teachers aren't really prepared to teach high school math. I mean, it's been 5 years, 10 years, maybe 20 years since they did high school math. Like solving the zeros of a quadratic function, kind of difficult. So, exactly. Huh?
I'll remember how to do scientific notation forever now.
Yeah. So, that's why I will try to never take a whole day off. So you guys will always see me, but the afternoon class, I just have them watch the video from the morning class.
So are you doing like that kind of blended learning with them already?
Yeah, I'm trying to decide, I'm doing a blended class next year. I'm trying to decide which class will be blended. So I think we're just gonna make it optional. One Math 7 class will be traditional and one Math 7 class will be blended.
Really traditional.
Yeah, and then new students. Yeah, the new 7th graders from next year pick which class. Anyone got a good idea for this? We're buying 2 meals and 6% on the subtotal and another 20% on the subtotal. End up being $27.72. The friends pay the tip on the meal cost only. Pranav, what do you think?
I'm not really sure, but is it 27.72 equals I think you open the parentheses and then go 6% plus 20% and then close the parentheses and then multiply by 2.
Some of what you said is good. You got a little fishy though. What do you mean? So we can, but then the issue becomes, how do I calculate my tax and my tip? 0.06 of what? Because it wouldn't just be 6% of one of the meals. James?
So the equation would be 2f plus parentheses 2f times 6%.
So James is saying, well, we're going to buy 2 of the food, and then, you said parentheses, right, just to make it nice, 2 times the 6% f, or 6% of the 2f, which actually that's a little bit more easy to understand. 6% of the 2 meals or the 2 foods.
And
Plus 20% of just f or the 2f. Here's something else I could do. What if I just decided 2f? Do you know what I'm going to say, Shaheem?
No, I added something else. Couldn't you put 2 f in front of parentheses and then do 0.06 plus 0.2?
You're missing one part of it. You could, but you'd also have to have a 1 in the parentheses, because to multiply for the initial meal costs, then the tax, then the tip. I could also introduce a new variable. Say that 2f is v or something like that for subtotal. You could have just said I had my subtotal plus 6% of my subtotal plus 20% of my subtotal equals that. You could calculate all that, and then once you find out what v is, you could just cut it in half. So if you wanted, you could introduce a new variable instead of doubling everything. That would be up to you. But if I do this, doubling 0.06 really gives me 0.12 f. Doubling 0.20 gives me 0.40 f. And that all equals 2772. Can I combine any like terms?
Yes!
You betcha. These are all like terms. So we get 2.52 f equals the 2772.
I know what to do, Mr. Hudson.
I hope we all know what to do. Class, what do we do?
Divide.
We divide.
Multiply. I mean, subtract.
So there's a point somewhere around middle school, high school, where saying the wrong answer stops being funny. I'm waiting for us to get to that point. 2.52. How much did each meal cost? $11. Your food was $11, which isn't bad if you're going out to eat to a sit-down restaurant. But that should make you think about, okay, if you want to go on a date, let's say like, well, I won't embarrass him. Let's say one of you guys wants to take another one of you guys on a date. And you're like, okay, I've got $25. I'll think this through.
I'll take Seth.
Sure, Nate's taking stuff on a date. A bro date. Bro dates are good. Every now and then I need a nice bro day. We go to the barcade, play some pinball.
I'm okay with that. That's fine.
Okay, but Nate and Seth are like, we got $25.
Let's go to the bar.
We're inappropriate. We got $11 meals. So they're thinking, okay, we have $25, $11 meals. We can afford this. But then you add in the tip. Well, first you have to add in the tax because you have to pay the tax. There's no, like, you have to pay the tax. Then tip, you should pay. You don't have to. If they only had $25, they wouldn't have enough to pay the tax and a 20% tip. Their tip would end up being like, I don't know, like 8% or something crappy. So that, you know, you have to think about, okay, the meal cost might only be $11, but there's extra costs on
And
top
it's
of
also
that.
dependent whether your waiter is
When they, we could
Exactly.
go to a
Whether your
sit-down
waiter's good or
restaurant,
not.
We could go to Wendy's and sit down and eat.
You can do the 4 for 4
Yeah, 4 for 4.
Or the McPick too.
and then have more money for the arcade.
Or the 5 for 4 at Burger
All right, now think about this. This kind of relates to it's kind of like an not ancient, but like an old riddle that they talked about, where Einstein apparently was asked by one of his teachers to add up all the numbers from 1 to 100, and he very quickly found the answer, and his teacher was like, "There's no way," and it was right. We can talk about that more someday because we're running out of time for today. But when you count by ones from any integer, you know that wherever you start, the next one is just that plus 1. The next one is just that plus 2. The next one is that plus 3. And actually how Einstein did it is he worked from both ends. He took his 1 and his 100, his 2 and his 99. He realized that, well, if I keep adding these, this is plus 1, this is minus 1, they cancel. Plus 1, minus 1, they cancel, they're the same. Plus 1, minus 1, they cancel, they're the same. So the sum of 3 consecutive integers, so an x plus 1, and an x plus 2, is negative 255. What are those 3 integers? So the first thing we can do is find out what is the initial x, the initial integer, and then figure out what's the next one and what's the next one. So if we want to sum these 3 integers, it'd be my x plus my x plus 1 plus my x plus 2. There's 3 consecutive integers. That all has to equal negative 255. What do I do now? First step before I try to solve, before we try to solve. But there's no distribution here because there's nothing, there's no value right up against the parentheses. There's only plus signs. Well, this is 1. All of these x's have a 1 in front of them. If you care about that. Okay. We combine like terms. Really, we're simplifying. That's always what you want to check before you solve. Can I simplify? I have x plus x plus x. They're like terms. We really have 3 x's. I have a plus 1 and a plus 2. Those combine to be 3. Negative 255. Now I'm able to start the solution process. Zach?
When you subtract by 3.
Yes, we will subtract each side by 3. And guys, as we get further into this, I'm not always going to write the in-between because you guys know what we're doing.
And then,
So we get negative,
252.
ooh, we go down. We go further negative. 258. Then, Shahib?
You would divide by 3.
Yep, divide by 3 on both sides. We get that x equals a negative, Olivia? 86. So, if we want to list out what my 3 integers were, the first one's negative 86, but what's the next one? If it's that plus 1, Shahib?
5.
If we add, we're now getting closer to 0. 85 and negative 84. Those would be our 3 consecutive integers.
Explain the Einstein.
So, Einstein, and this is a good riddle that sometimes teachers will ask you to solve. Einstein was asked to add all the numbers from 1 to 100. So he realizes that 1 plus 100 is 101. But let's forget about 100 for a minute. 1 plus 99 is 100. 2 and 98 is 100. 3 and 97
Is
is
100.
100. 4 and 96 is 100. So all he did was see, well, if I go from 1 up to 49, and from 99 down to 51, all of those pairs make hundreds.
You know what it is, Mr.
So he gets 49 hundreds from doing that.
That's 4,000.
Then he has the extra 50 that's right in the middle,
Yep.
and the extra 100 that's right at the end.
So it's 5,050.
So 4,900 plus another 100 plus another 50 equals 5,050.